Okay, let's have a think about some key moments that are quite essential when we're talking about inclusive practices in learning and teaching. There are other moments that have contributed to the whole philosophy, but the most relevant ones is the introduction of the Disabled Students Allowance, which was established by the Department of Education and Skills in 1993. Uh, this was the funding strand of support which was given to disabled students within higher education. And that funding went towards both equipment support and also human support for disabled students. Other key moments was the Disability Discrimination Act, which came out in 1995, which prevented any discrimination being allowed within education or in employment or in the general public. Superseding that came the Equality Act in 2010, which again has an overarching brief of preventing discrimination, not just for disabled people, but other protective characteristics such as sexual orientation, gender, race, etc. In April 2014, David Willetts, who at the time was the Minister for Universities, Science, and at the time announced changes and amendments to this funding support for disabled students, which was called the Disabled Students Allowance. And those changes were implemented in September 2016, which means there was quite a considerable reduction in the type of support that was offered towards disabled students. Some of the major impacts of the reduction and amendments in the Disabled Students Allowance focuses on the withdrawal of non-medical helper support for students. This is human resources that were previously paid for by the government, and now the onus is being put back on the Higher Education Institute to provide these services, and not for the government to include these in the Disabled Students Allowance. Some examples of the human support that will no longer be funded by the government is practical support assistant, library support assistant, readers, sighted guides, principally for visually impaired people, proofreader, examination support workers, which may be either scribes or readers within exams, manual note takers, which means that if a student requires their notes to be taken within a lecture, a person who would do that is no longer funded by the Disabled Students Allowance. The definition of diversity, which is put by the Higher Education Authority, is defined as a diverse student body is one which includes individuals of different nationalities, race, creed, colour, religion, sexual orientation, gender, age, disability, and socio-economic groups. The reason for inclusive education in general is driven by a number of factors. As mentioned, the reduction in disabled students allowance is a key element. The increase of targets for international student recruitment, the BME student attainment gap, which has been going on for a number of years, projects and campaigns such as Why is My Curriculum White, student liberation campaign groups, which are ran normally through student representatives and student unions. Platforms, which can be of various types, such as the recent LGBT networks and issues. Naturally, lots of other widening participation initiatives and lots of other things that in general are happening across a lot of universities, such as Athena Swan projects, etc.